Rain poured from the heavens in relentless sheets, drumming on the cracked asphalt of the quiet country road. The sky had been a brooding gray since morning, and by afternoon, it had surrendered to a storm that seemed determined to wash away everything in its path. Margaret Hayes leaned heavily on her cane as she made her slow way home from the small-town grocery, her thin raincoat plastered to her body. She was 78, small-boned and wiry, the kind of woman who had spent a lifetime doing without but never complained. Her husband had died 15 years ago, her son even longer before that, lost to a roadside accident on a rainy night not unlike this one. Her grocery bag, clutched tightly in one hand, was filled with the barest of necessities. Half a loaf of bread, a pint of milk, and 3 apples. It had cost her the last of her $10. Her pension check was late again, and she'd have to stretch what she had as she always did. The wind whipped at her white hair and she winced at the cold that cut through her coat. She kept walking, counting each step to keep her mind off the ache in her legs. Up ahead, through the streaks of rain, she spotted something unusual. A motorcycle leaned awkwardly into a ditch at the side of the road. Its chrome gleam was dulled by splashes of mud. Standing beside it was a man in his late 20s, struggling to right the machine. He wore a black leather jacket that looked more soaked than protective, and his boots squelched in the mud as he kicked at the ground. For a moment, Margaret hesitated. This wasn't her concern. In a storm like this, she could barely help herself, let alone a stranger with a heavy machine. But then she saw him slump down beside the bike, his head in his hands, and something inside her softened. He looked lost, defeated. He looked like her boy, Tommy, on the day he'd left for his first road trip, all confidence and restless dreams. The memory struck her hard, a flash of her son's wide grin, his promise to be back before dinner. He never came back. She drew a deep breath and took a step closer. "You need some help, son?" She called over the roar of the rain. The man lifted his head quickly, startled. His hair clung to his face, dark and dripping, and his eyes, kind eyes, brown and weary, met hers. "I'm all right, ma'am," he said, his voice rough with cold. "Just ran out of gas. I'll walk to town once the rain eases up." Margaret frowned. "Town's 6 miles away, and this storm doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon," she said. "You'll catch your death before you get there." He gave a small, hopeless laugh. "Yeah, well, guess that's my luck today." She looked at the empty gas tank, then at his trembling hands. Something inside her made the decision before her mind could catch up. "Wait here," she said firmly. The biker blinked. "What? Ma'am, you don't have to." But she was already hobbling off down the road, her cane thudding against the wet ground. The young man called after her, but she didn't stop. Her grocery bag felt heavier with every step, and her heart thudded painfully in her chest. By the time she reached the small gas station at the crossroads, she was soaked through and shaking. The clerk behind the counter, a kid barely old enough to shave, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Hayes? You came out in this? Need a gallon of gas?" she said, pulling her last $10 bill from her pocket with trembling fingers. "And a can to put it in." He frowned. "You sure? You could have waited till now," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. A few minutes later, she was back on the road, clutching the small red jerry can by the handle. Her arm ached, her legs felt like wet rags, and every gust of wind threatened to knock her off balance, but she kept going. When she reached the bend again, the biker was still there, sitting in the mud with his jacket pulled tight around him. He looked up in disbelief as she came closer. "Where did you... Got you some gas," she said, setting the can beside the motorcycle. Her voice was soft but firm, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. His eyes widened. "Ma'am, I can't take that." "You must have walked all the way." "I did," she interrupted gently. "And I'm not taking no for an answer." He stood up quickly, brushing mud from his jacket. "Let me pay you back," she shook her head. "Don't you worry about that. Just promise me you'll get home safe." He stared at her, speechless. The rain had begun to slow, falling now in softer drops like the world was holding its breath. "You don't even know me," he said finally. Margaret smiled faintly, her wrinkles deepening. "Don't have to. You look like someone's boy." The biker swallowed hard. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then with careful hands he unscrewed the gas cap and poured the fuel into his tank. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. Relief flashed across his face. He turned back to her. "Thank you, ma'am, really, what's your name?" "Margaret Hayes," she said, pulling her damp coat tighter. "And you?" Lucas, he replied. Lucas Grant, she nodded. Well, Lucas, you best get moving. Road'll be slick, but you'll make it home if you're careful. He hesitated. You live around here? I could give you a ride home, she chuckled. Son, I ain't climbed on a motorcycle since Eisenhower was president. I'll manage. Lucas smiled, though his eyes still looked heavy with emotion. He held out his hand and she took it. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. But I'll never forget that you did. Good, she said, giving his hand a gentle pat. Then you'll remember to do the same for someone else one day. He nodded, a lump in his throat. She turned to leave, her cane tapping steadily on the wet ground. Lucas stood watching her small figure grow smaller in the rain until she disappeared around the bend. When she finally reached her home, a weathered white farmhouse at the edge of town, her coat was soaked, her hair plastered to her forehead. She hung the coat by the door and set her groceries on the counter. Though the bread was soggy and the milk had leaked through the paper bag, still she smiled to herself. It wasn't much of a meal, but the warmth in her heart was worth more than any feast. As she lit the small kerosene lamp on her kitchen table, the soft flame flickered against the peeling wallpaper. The house smelled faintly of rain and dust, and for a moment, she imagined her husband's voice teasing her for being out in weather like this. You're a stubborn one, Maggie, he would have said, that familiar twinkle in his eye. She laughed softly at the thought, the sound echoing through the empty room. Later, she sat by the window with her old blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the rain ease into a drizzle. Her hands were still trembling slightly from the cold, but inside she felt an odd warmth, a quiet satisfaction that she couldn't quite explain. She had so little left in this world, but tonight she had given something that mattered. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees. A lone motorcycle's hum faded into the distance, swallowed by the wet horizon. Margaret closed her eyes, her lips curving in a tired but peaceful smile. When she finally crawled into bed, the clock on the mantel ticked softly, marking each passing second. She thought about the young man's face, his surprise, his gratitude, and wondered where he was now. Maybe he was home, dry and warm, thinking of her. Maybe he wasn't. It didn't matter. The important thing was that for one small moment, she had made the world a little kinder. She drifted off to sleep to the steady rhythm of rain against the window. In the morning, she woke to a silence so complete it startled her. The storm had passed, leaving the air bright and clean. Sunlight spilled across her worn floorboards, glinting off the glass of her framed photographs. Her husband in uniform, her son as a boy grinning with missing teeth, a lifetime of memories frozen in time. She shuffled to the kitchen to make tea, humming softly. The kettle had just begun to whistle when she heard it, a deep, distant rumble, low and steady. At first she thought it was thunder again, rolling in from the hills, but it grew louder. She frowned, setting down the kettle, and moved toward the window. The sound swelled, rising like a wave. It wasn't thunder. It was engines, many of them. Her breath caught in her throat. Down the long country road that led to her house came a convoy of motorcycles, their chrome shining under the morning sun. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more, riding in perfect formation. The sound of their engines echoed through the valley, deep and powerful, like a heartbeat made of thunder and steel. Margaret stood frozen, one hand against the window pane. The riders slowed as they approached her house, tires crunching on gravel, and began to park in a neat row along her fence line. A few dismounted, pulling off their helmets. She recognized one face immediately, Lucas. He smiled up at her from the yard and waved. Margaret's heart stuttered. She opened the door slowly, stepping out onto the porch as the morning air brushed against her face. The smell of leather, gasoline, and warm earth filled the air. The engines quieted, leaving a thick silence broken only by the chirping of birds. "Mrs. Hayes," Lucas called, walking up the path toward her. "Hope we didn't scare you. What on earth is all this?" she asked, voice trembling. He grinned. "Just a few friends who wanted to say thank you." Behind him, the other riders began unloading boxes from the back of a pickup truck, boxes filled with groceries, canned goods, and supplies. One man carried a large cardboard box labeled furnace unit, while another brought a roll of new roofing shingles. Margaret covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Lucas stopped in front of her, holding out an envelope. "You gave me your last $10 yesterday, ma'am. I told my club about it. We